And we're live. Thank you, everyone who's watching this podcast. We are again here in eAfterWorks, and we have a new session to talk about a new topic in IT, GenAI, and platform engineering. And this week is a very special one because we have back-to-back sessions. We have a session today with Severin Neumann, and tomorrow we're gonna have another session with Diana. And the special thing is we are going to talk a lot about OpenTelemetry from all the perspectives. Before giving the stage to Severin, I'm just gonna share with you a couple of upcoming sessions. So as you know, the last time we had Sam from Platform Engineering. This week, as I said, we have two interesting sessions. This one about Numa is going to be about OpenTelemetry. We're going to get all the details from the high level of the leaders all the way down to the developers and how you can contribute to the OpenTelemetry project if you want to take the certification, what it takes, etc. And tomorrow we're going to have a use case, a real life use case of OpenTelemetry and its integration with another platform or another product, which is called Victoria Metrics. And Dana is going to explain this to us. I'm done with my slide. I'm going to remove it here. Severin, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine today. Thank you for having me, Assis.
Thank you very much for coming here. I mean, you don't need any introduction. You are pretty known in the field of OpenTelemetry. But if I wanted to describe you in a couple of sentences, what would you describe yourself as?
Yeah, sure. So, what can I say? Like, I'm one of the OpenTelemetry Governance Committee members. So, like, we're the people that make sure that the project is healthy, and then like all the questions from people get answered, and like thinking about where are we going with the project. And then I'm also like one of the maintainers of the OpenTelemetry documentation. So whatever you read on that page, I spend a lot of time writing that and then reviewing the things that other people are writing. And outside of that, I'm working at a company that's called Causely AI, where we build a platform or an engine that really helps you to predict and prevent issues. So it's a reliability platform, and I can spend a little bit of time talking later about it as well. But I think maybe we start talking about observability, OpenTelemetry, whatever you like, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction. And as you said, we're going to talk about the two things. We're going to talk about OpenTelemetry, and then we're going to talk about Kojali and how you guys to put this into production. Um, you mentioned that you're writing the documentation, and you are the person who is responsible for writing the documentation of OpenTelemetry. How is that? I mean, for me, when I I start working on OpenTelemetry integration, most of the times I have a headache, and it's it's very hard to get around what's available, what's not, etc.
Yeah.
How do you go about your journey in writing this documentation and understanding and actually explaining
Yeah.
to others what you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I'm of course, how you say, not the only one doing that, right? I mean, I'm very lucky to have a few co-maintainers and approvers and continuous contributors. So this is way beyond a one-man show. And also, like, my journey started with like me having a lot of people lifting me up, right?
Mhm.
How did I get to that? So this was like already, oh gosh, I think 5 years ago, something like that. It has been a little bit of a while. And before that, I worked at a APM vendor, right? So we had our
Mhm.
Java agents and .NET agents and what else. And then the question popped up more and more about back then open tracing, and then suddenly OpenTelemetry. And I talked with a lot of customers, and I had the feeling like, hey, to be credible, I need to be able to talk OpenTelemetry not only as a vendor and say like, yeah, this is not mature enough, and use our stuff, and we tell you when to use OpenTelemetry, which was just a reality like 4 or 5 years ago. And then that brought me to OpenTelemetry, and the thing I did back then, and this was maybe, let's say, a good starting point, is like I went into the JavaScript SIG,
Mhm.
and I went into the repository and I said like, okay, let me just try out their getting started guide, right? Let me just try out if I can get a JavaScript running. And everything that's not working, I just open them up an issue and say like, hey, that thing here is not working. Can I fix that, right? And I said
Okay.
like, yeah, cool. Thank you for finding that issue. We haven't looked at this for a while. I don't know, maybe stopped working with Node.js. What was new 5 years ago? I don't know, 18, and it was written for 16, so I migrated that. And by then, like so this is also what I very often say to newcomers.
Mm.
this is a superpower that you bring to a project, right? You're like the outside face to the project. So like if you're not happy with how our documentation is, then tell us, right? And that's the best way. And then over time you really learn about those things. And then at some point you sit down and say like, hey, for example, recently I was like, I need to think more about context propagation. So I went down and rewrote this page and took a few pieces apart, and that's how it's working now, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned there an interesting thing, which you went from the pain, and then you tried to solve that pain by looking for a product or something that would solve this. Before going into the details or the technical details that we're gonna deep dive into, how do you see the adoption of OpenTelemetry today? What is like the high level picture, and do you think that people are realizing the importance of the thing and they're trying to adapt, or there is still like some pushback from either for the vendors or from the end users?
I think the adoption is so unfortunately we have a hard time to get real numbers, right? So it's not like, unfortunately, that the vendors come back to us and say like, hey, we have that many customers using OpenTelemetry versus the other one. Maybe that's an initiative we should do at some point. But overall, like, I have the feeling like if people think about observability today, that's equal for them to think about OpenTelemetry, right? And every vendor in this space, and of course I mean the big ones, but also like there's many small ones. So one of the things I do for the documentation website, I maintain like the website of vendors that support OpenTelemetry, and I think we recently reached 90 or something like that. So there's like many companies out there, and all of them have like OpenTelemetry as a first-class citizen. And of course you have a set of companies that have, let's say, the pre-OpenTelemetry APM agent monitoring solutions, whatever. But the thing I see with most of them is like they want to show their customers a route from like, hey, this is what you had in the past, and we bring you along for the journey with OpenTelemetry. So my feeling is, and of course I'm biased here, right? It is already the de facto standard for doing observability, especially when you want to have logs, metrics, traces, all of it in one place, right?
Yeah. And do you think that this is something that is supported by the vendors, or is it just they're just doing this adoption mindset for the marketing's sake?
I think one of the most interesting things about OpenTelemetry is that like contribution comes from lots of vendors, right? If you look at a lot of open source projects, even large open source projects or famous CNCF projects, there's often one, maybe two companies contributing to that. But with OpenTelemetry, I would say like I would have to guess, but there's like 10, 15, 20 companies that are really doing like the big chunk of the contributions, and those companies are also like the big vendors in the space, right? So yeah, those vendors are contributing. Should they contribute more? Of course. I mean, it's open source, right? I mean, the thing is, of course, always like you would need more contributor, you would need more people, especially writing documentation. But at the end of the day, my feeling is like OpenTelemetry will be a really lucky project that there's so many vendors that send their people to contribute to it and create the language-specific implementations, take care of the collector, look into the whole specification work and semantic convention works, which actually is like, from a vendor perspective, the hardest part, right? Writing all the specification and like all this paperwork, which not immediately turns into something they can consume in their product. And sometimes it takes a year or even longer to go from the idea to like something usable, versus like if I do it as a company, I can of course do this much quicker. So this is really something I think that's very great about OpenTelemetry. Yeah.
Great. One of the things that I have noticed dealing with the EPM and OpenTelemetry is when we talk about the monitoring or observability of traditional applications that have nothing to do with GenAI. I think that the traditional approach of using the vendor agent or the vendor approach is still there. But for all the products that are around generative AI applications, they by default start building on OpenTelemetry? Is this like something that you have noticed this with?
I mean, there's like the one thing, like, and this is like also something we're like excited about, right? Is that like a lot of the I think it's the Gemini CLI, I think the one from Anthropic, and a few other ones, like they come with OpenTelemetry support out of the box. Of course, there are some people talking with people and suggesting that to them, but like I know a few of them, like we didn't know about it, right? Sometimes someone told me like, hey, did you know this AI project is adopting OpenTelemetry? Hey, did you know this and that is supporting OpenTelemetry? But I think at the end it totally makes sense, because like OpenTelemetry is a really good fit for like how Gen AI works, and how you have this flow, for example, at a very simple, like this prompting going back and forth, where you want to have some insights into that. But even like an agentic workflow, where you say like, hey, you have microservices that are now called agents that are interacting with each other, or also interacting with services, and you want to have traceability, right? You want to go through those things. Yeah, that's definitely making it a good fit. And there is a working group, and I think it's one of the most active ones, that's also looking into this whole like, hey, how do we create the semantic conventions for that? And if you don't know what semantic conventions are, the idea behind that is, at OpenTelemetry, at some point, people figured out, like, if we send the data back to the backend, and if we don't give things unique names, then you have to rebuild your dashboards, you have to redo your alerts, and again, and especially also LLMs really profit from things having the same name, right? So if we look at HTTP request, and if you think about like just the method, right, just the post get whatever, is it http.request.verb, or is it http.method, or like, and at some point someone needs to say like, hey, this is always X, right? And this is also like something we now do for Gen AI and LLMs. Unfortunately, I don't have the right terminology in my head right now, but you also have like, if you, I don't know, want to store like which model you're using, or which vendor you're using, or what is like parts of the prompt you're sending, like this is specified, and then you can rely on that independent of like what vendor you're using.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon the interoperability of the observability, which means that, for example, if you have two models that are different, the fact that they support OpenTelemetry and they support that semantic convention would allow on the same dashboard to have both the data of the two models, for example, or mini models that you have, and then you can aggregate data and create it on there. Great. So if we want to get back to the topic of today, which is what does every leader need to know OpenTelemetry? So if I'm, for example, a leader in a big company, and you tell me that I need to adopt OpenTelemetry, I would tell you I don't have the budget to have a team to get expertise. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, are there experts in OpenTelemetry today, or is it just everybody is still learning to get to that level of expertise in OpenTelemetry?
Maybe I pick the first one first, because like the other one is probably going to be a long answer and maybe even a debate. I would say yes, there's experts out there for observability and OpenTelemetry these days. And I think the other day I read something on, I think it was the SRE Reddit. Someone asked a question around like, hey, does it make sense to specialize on observability and monitoring? And a few more senior SREs answered like, it makes no sense to specialize into that, because like it's a very big chunk of the work that you need to do, right? I mean, you need to be able to understand how your services are interacting, and how they're working, and what they're doing, and if they're healthy. And for all of that, you need observability, right? You need to see, so to speak. So, but of course, yeah, I mean, there's like, I speak with people that say like, hey, we have deployed hundreds and thousands of collectors, and they know very much what to do with that. And very often I tell them like, hey, can you give me a rundown of that? So if you're like in the audience, like having large deployments of OpenTelemetry, I'm more than happy to talk about that with you. Let's talk about the leaders, or why you would need OpenTelemetry, right? So I say the how you say, like The blunt answer is you don't, right? You don't need OpenTelemetry, right?
Okay.
What you actually
There's no
need.
elevator pitch here, right?
Yeah, no, but stay with me a minute. Also, observability is not really what you want, right? What
Okay.
you want at the end is like control, right? You want to understand your systems, you want to improve your systems, you want to debug those systems, right? So you want to have this place where you can go and say like, hey, are my services doing what they're supposed to do, or is there an incident or whatever? And the thing is not observability or OpenTelemetry is not you want. It's what you need to accomplish this goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is how I think about observability and OpenTelemetry. People often asking like, okay, what's observability, what's monitoring, etc., etc. We can have an evening-long debate about that one as well. Opinions like deviate very, very much about that. I had a lot of debates about that, and the more I have, the more I'm like,
Do you want me to give you my version and then I wanted
yeah,
to correct
sure,
it?
sure. And I'm always, before I do it, give me yours.
Yeah. So my version from what I have collected, like doing this podcast, is I think a lot of people agree that monitoring is knowing the state of your systems, and observability is being able to answer questions about your
Can I? Yeah,
infrastructure.
yeah.
What do you think about that definition?
No, I think yeah, I think that's and I like this definition very much because it's not the one versus the other, right? Very often it's like, hey, nobody's doing monitoring anymore, everybody's only doing observability, which is just not true, right? I mean, you need what you just said, like you need to look at this thing and say like, hey, what's the state of my system, right? However you do that, I mean, we could have a very deep and long conversation only about that topic. And then observability is really like the let's say original definition was something like, I have it in front of me. Observability is a measure of how well internal states of a system can be inferred from knowledge of its external outputs. That's like the Wikipedia definition. I just
Mm-hmm.
have it in front of me. What does this mean? Like, what are internal states? Like the hidden conditions of the system, resource usage, process states, how like things are flowing from one system to the other, and what are external outputs? Of course, like the outputs of your system, right? Like the the HTTP response that you're sending back, the HTML that is rendered on your screen, whatever, but also the telemetry that you're sending. So logs, metrics, traces, events, and profiles, they really help you to not only like see the state or like say like, oh, this state is different from what it should be, but really also look into it and say like, okay, I can understand it, I can ask questions about it, and those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
For me, very often is then a thing like, okay, that sounds really great. So let's then collect as much data as possible, because then we can take every internal state and can be exactly infer from the outputs what's going on. But how far do you want to go, right? Do you really want
Okay.
to have every bit shift to go really
Do you stop
crazy, right?
at the error level or the debug level? Where do you stop
Yeah,
exactly?
exactly. So the next really interesting question that I'm debating with a lot of people right now is like, okay, if we cannot have this perfect observability, how I like to call it, like what is sufficient and what is purposeful observability, right? What is really this thing that we should be doing, right? And that's like a debate that's very, very active right now. But to go back to your to stay with your questions around what should leaders know or do at
Yep.
the end, if they want to have healthy systems, if they want to build something or use something that gives them reliability, they will not get around observability, and with that, they will not get around OpenTelemetry. There is not a lot of competition out there, especially if you want to have more than logs or more than metrics. If you really want to have logs, metrics, traces, events, eventually profiling, like from one solution.
So pretty much it's subjective, and it should come from the pain. You should know the pain of not being able to observe or to make your
Exactly.
infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if I assume that now I have realized that I'm not able to control and see what's going on in my platform, where do I start? Should I just go ahead and plug any open source project out there? Should I like reflect and think about? I think one of the good things that you're doing with the OpenTelemetry project is you're basically creating something like a Bible of the OpenTelemetry. You're defining
Yeah.
you're defining things first before giving answers to the problematic or the questions of OpenTelemetry or of observability in general. You start by semantics. You start by the definition of what is a log, what is a metric, etc., and then you start and talk about how you can take advantage of this to answer your problems.
Yeah.
So, where do I start as a leader?
Yeah. I think if we remain for the time being as a leader, right? Because the answer for a developer or for an SRE might be slightly different, right? But if we really think about the people that have to figure out like, hey, what are we even doing, right? Like, I think then we have to think about like two different ways how to approach that. And the one thing we see right now, a lot of people are doing, and this is going back to what I said a minute ago, is like, hey, we collect all the data, and then we figure out later what to do with it, right? So we take a bottom-up approach, and then when you tell people like, hey, actually that's not a good idea, they say like, yeah, but this is very important to me because maybe there's this one log line that will explain my next incident, and if I'm not collecting that, I don't know, my house will explode or whatever, right? So there's this like what I started calling fear-driven bottom-up data hoarding, right? Where you're like driven by that, and then the question is like, okay, what can I do instead? And they are still like, hey, do you do purposeful observability? So what's most important? So instead, very obvious, instead of starting from the bottom, start from the top, right? What's most important? And then really collect what you need. And you're an engineer, right? Most of us have engineer somewhere in your title. So be an engineer if you call yourself an engineer. So fear-driven is not what an engineer does, right? We are actually, or should be trained to think about like, hey, how much risk is okay? There will always be risk, right? If you're an engineer building a bridge, you would also not say like, hey, I just put there a huge block of concrete, and probably there's a lot of reasons why you should not be doing that. But like, you cannot just build the best thing, right? You have to take some trade-offs. So that's the very, let's say, high level answer. And then of course people ask like, okay, that's really cool, but what does this mean, the most important things, right? And then the thing is like, okay, how do I go from this bottom to that top? So and just last week I created a phrase for that for myself, where I said like, yeah, we use for that I called it the 3.5 who cares. So who cares about collecting data, right? You kind of asked me this in the beginning, like, who cares about OpenTelemetry? Who cares about logs, traces, and metrics? And my immediate answer was like, maybe nobody, I don't know. So who cares about that? Teams running services, right? They care about that because they need to deliver reliability. But you can ask again the question like, who cares? Who cares that my services are reliable? Who cares that my services are running? Very obvious answer. Your business cares about it, right? They offer their services and they want their services to be running. But then you can ask again the question like, okay, who cares about your business, right? I mean, there's so many businesses out there. Yeah, your customers care about that, right? They use your banking app to send money to their friends, or they use their short messaging service to send a hello to their mom or whatever. Who cares about that? This is then the half who cares, because like their goals are not our goals, but our goal is like really to help them. So the thing we really need to make sure is that customers can accomplish their goals through our services in a delightful way. So we have to make sure that their interactions with our services need to be reliable, right? That's like at the very top. This is like what you as a leader should have top of mind, that to make sure like, okay, I'm a business and I want services to be running, and we can next map this to traces, logs, and metrics. But before that, maybe you want to interject or ask any questions.
I think what you're saying basically is you gotta start at the KPI level. You gotta define your SLOs, and then you go from the top to bottom, and then you try to define what would make you achieve those SLOs, and what should be your indicators, and what would make you be able to respect those or achieve those KPIs. And
exactly.
I think there is a challenge with this, because if I talk from a perspective of a business leader or just a leader of a team, the question that I would get from my hierarchy is, how much money do you need this year? Where is the budget? Where is the expectation? And for this I need to do some capacity planning. And if it's an iterative approach and they don't understand that it's an iterative thing and I need many iterations so that I can achieve a nominal state or a state that would allow me to achieve 80% of my project, then there's a bit of friction there. There's a bit of problem. Do you see?
Yeah. No, I think I think you call out the big issue with what I'm talking about. This is of course like, hey, if everybody would live in a perfect world and would have all the money and all the time in the universe. And by the way, we are not starting a green field, right? You have a what people call a brown field, so you have services already, you have observability already, etc., etc. Let me bring you back to what I said in the beginning, why I went into the OpenTelemetry. That I was like I was a pre-sales engineer and I was talking with people about like when to use what, and back then I said like, hey, stick with your IPM, and I can give the same answer here. At the end, it's a journey, right? Observability, like you will not get this perfect by day one, so it's a journey, and if you're doing effective data hoarding today and it's working for you, that's awesome. But if you then really want to level up and to get better with that, I think just having this mental model of like, okay, what is it that I actually want to accomplish, right? Did I focus on the business needs, right? Even as an SRE or at that person at the observability engineer, you're also a business person, right? I mean, we all have a job in a company most of the time or an organization, and our goal is to serve that, right? And the thing I wanted to say is like, how do I map this to traces, logs, and metrics? Those customer interactions are very often your traces, right? Very often it's like, hey, I want to check out in my e-commerce platform. That's very often can be represented by traces. I want to send someone some money. There's an API call doing that. So the thing I see very often as extremely valuable, instead of thinking about your logs and your metrics and your services and your infrastructure and everything, is really thinking about like those services or those interactions that people take with your services and then really build from there, right? But as you said, like it's of course a hassle, and I'm not in a role where I do that, so I very much appreciate that like an SRE or an IT ops team, of course, has a lot more challenges than that. So I'm also more than open after this or right now to take all the how you say, like counter arguments to that, to refine my messaging on that.
I think you have much of a harder job, which is like bringing documentation and explaining the complicated things to people. Yeah, I think we have talked enough about like politics of the game, but now do you want to tell us like a use case, for example, tell us about Causally and how you are using this OpenTelemetry and how you are putting this
Sure.
into use.
So let me think. Maybe I can start with sharing my screen with you on that real quick. I really don't want to let's say.
Yeah, and while you're waiting for this, we have a comment here from Amino who's saying that it's a bit tricky to talk to the business leaders about your observability needs. Yeah, and that's exactly what you were saying. It's not an easy task to justify or be able to put value to the observability or the telemetry that you're collecting, which is the most
and even worse, right? I mean, the thing is like, everybody understands observability extremely valuable the moment you have an incident, right?
Exactly.
The moment you have an incident and you can tell people, look, we use whatever vendor we have, and we drill down these traces, these logs, these metrics, and we pay them, I don't know, $30,000 per month. But this incident, if we would not have fixed it that much, would have saved us 10 times that, cost us 10 times that. That's very easy to argue, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what you want to do, and this also is a really good lead over into Causally, is like, you don't want incidents to happen, right? Actually, you want to be predictive and preventive. and then it becomes even harder to argue, like, why should you spend money on that? So sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it looks like you need those incidents sometimes to argue for that, right? So that's the, I think, the so-called prevention paradoxon. So but anyways, it's a good lead over into causally. So let me, can I share the screen, or can you do that for me? Yeah. Exactly. So this is the Causely website, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, and give you more around the product itself. But I think what this website just wants to give to you is, like, we at Causely, we are not yet another observability vendor, right? You have probably already a great observability vendor, but what we give you really is this, what we call deterministic AI. So what we use, and I will talk about this in a minute a little bit more, is causal reasoning about your whole platform, right? That means, like, if you have a complex microservice infrastructure, Causely can really help you to understand, like, okay, if something is not in the state you want to have it, to use the words that you used earlier, what's the reason for that? What's the cause for that, right? And in a complex environment, this could mean that, like, this service here is misbehaving, but the cause is somewhere here because there's some things that are propagating through, right? So what we really want to give you is something that looks at the state, at the current state of your environment, and it looks like, hey, where it's deviating from the state that you want to have based on logs, traces, and metrics, and then calls out, like, okay, I see all those symptoms here. So here's something slow, here something has errors, here something is OOM killed all the time. And if you look at all those issues, they all point to this one cause explaining that. But what
is
is
that more like
important,
of a smart correlation? We can call it that way. So like you start from the problem.
it's not correlation, it's causation, right?
Okay.
we
Yeah, yeah,
really, yeah, no, but thank you for asking this question, right? So
yeah.
we, the technique behind that is called causal inference. And maybe I can talk a little bit more about how causally works, and that maybe makes it a little bit more obvious how this works, right? To answer this question, it is a very important question, and now you cannot see it because I have our shark over here in my background. So since you talk about correlation, right? There's a lot of tools out there today that say, like, hey, let's do correlation, right? Let's look at metric A and metric B, and if they're, like, moving together, oh, there's probably there's probably something broken. The screen sharing, I'm not sharing anything else. Like, I'm talking about the shark here behind me in the background, right? There's the shark that says, like,
I think they misunderstood that. Oh, it's fine.
yeah, apologies, but good that you call this out, right? So that way I can point to that. So when we say sharks love sugar, why are we using, like, this funny anecdote? It's like, think about it, in the summer, more people eat ice cream, and there's more shark attacks at the beach, right? So those numbers every year in the summer go up. So what's the logical explanation for that? Sharks
There's
love
no.
sugar because, like, people eat sugar, people are sweet now, and the sharks eat them. So that's the correlation, right? That
Yeah.
the causation is summer, and then more people are at the beach, and then something like that. That's of course not, that's hidden behind the numbers, right? And that's what we try to do with software as well, right? So what we do is, like, we take in all the telemetry that you have, right? You see this here, and of course we have OpenTelemetry for that. If you, for example, don't have anything, we use the eBPF-based OBI or the Grafana Bela. Also, if you have Prometheus or Datadog, or we recently added Instana, we also can pull in alerts from Incident.io. Like we take as much data as we can in, right? But how we do it, we do this locally, right? So you deploy a mediation layer at your place, and what this thing does, it's really looking for the symptoms, right? It looks at, like, all your components, and it's looking at the symptoms, and it's looking like, hey, do I have an issue with congestion or error rates, or is there a lot of kills? Like, it's finding all those symptoms, and that is what it's sending back to the backend, right? And that's what I said, like, we're not an observability vendor, right? What we do with that is then what we call here causal reasoning, right? So we take all the symptoms and we take like the information that we have and give you like this topology, the service map that you of course also know from your observability vendor. But what we layer on top of that is this causal network, right? Where we say like, hey, if this service here shows a certain symptom, then it may be explained by this other thing here, right? So there's a probability attached to that. So it's a probabilistic network. And what we do then is like we look at the list of symptoms that we see in your environment, we put those into a code book, and then we have another axis where we say like, okay, and what are the most likely explanations for that, the causes for that, right? And by that we can infer with a very high probability, so in the 95%, what the root cause of something is. I always try to avoid the word root cause, because if you hear root cause, you're like, oh, this is for incidents. No, this is also for things like before something goes wrong, right? Before like this is also extremely valuable to find out like, hey, what is the next thing that might break, or what are the things that are slowing down my environment, right? So that's what we're giving you. And then last but not least, it's sent back into whatever place you're working, right? If you have Slack or Grafana or think about it, right? How does this look like in the product, right? So here's like our UI, and as you can see, it's fairly clean, right? So in many other platforms, you would see like I don't know, what would we have? Active symptom 66. So worst case, you would have 66 alerts. But what you see right now is one root cause. There's of course a few other ones that we are not deeming as urgent. So those are the ones where we really say like, hey, this is most likely an incident, or this is something impacting an SLO or a very important service for you. And as said, this here is not an alert. This is really telling you like, hey, we have a slow execution here in this path, and it's impacting a few other services. So what we can do, we can click into that. And then Causally is really explaining you like, oh, you have here a congestion in this execution thing. And what this is doing, it's like impacting 3 other services, right? So it's explaining 3 other alerts that you might have, at least, probably a few more. And we can even show you something what we call the blast radius, right? Where we can then really say like, okay, execution is impacting client and is impacting front end, et cetera, et cetera. And what we can do from there, we can even give you remediation, right? So this is a very simple one that we say like, hey, scale it up. Yesterday, for example, I had a root cause with a demo environment, the OpenTelemetry demo environment, and I hope I can write about this really soon, where it really tells me like, hey, there's something wrong in your .NET code, and probably you should do something specific with it, and we can then use an MCP server to send this over, right? And maybe
before,
like sorry.
Before you keep going, there's a question here. Was Ricardo asking, where does it infer the connections between the services? And I can answer this from my understanding, and then I want to correct me if I'm wrong here. I think you're doing it from the service map that you get from the trace IDs that connect all the services. Is that what you're doing?
In a very short sense, yes, exactly. So we are not depending on like architecture and environment details. So the thing I explained. So there's like let's say more or less our model, like the codified thing where we have like all this knowledge, where we say like, hey, certain services can like if there's an HTTP path, here's like certain ways how those things can impact each other. But if we then deploy this into your environment, of course, we span this about like the things that you have in your place, right? So we build out the model for you. So it's not specific to like a test environment, or it's not like, hey, we need to train the model for days and weeks on your environment. No, it's really like we put this, we use that more generic knowledge across like your specific architecture, and this is working really, really well, right? So I said I can.
Are you saying that you have are you using an LLM? I would imagine, right?
That part, and this is maybe good that you call this out. This part is not an LLM, no, because LLMs, again, what you said about correlations, LLMs are amazing at finding correlations and finding patterns. And we all know this works well to a certain extent, but at some point they start to hallucinate, or they start to maybe make things up, or struggle with like figuring out like causation, right? So this part is not an LLM. Where we use an LLM in the latest versions of Causely is like to create some of the descriptions here and the remediations, and where we also use one, and I can recommend that like we can also of course send then this data down into an MCP server, and then you can use it to fix your code with that information. But like this causal model, that's not an LLM, no.
Okay, so it's basically another machine learning models that you would basically.
It's the classic. It's AI, but it's not an LLM.
Yeah. I figured that once you've said that you retrain it on the data of people, I figured out that it cannot be an LLM. You cannot just retrain an LLM every time you
yeah, exactly. No, it's not. Yeah, and I think again, this is really something what made me very excited about like I joined Causely in end of March this year, and what really excited me about that is like this is a very mathematical, scientific, grounded information. So Shmuel, our founder, he already founded 2 other companies. So Turbonomics, and before that Smarts, that did the same thing more in the networking and in the resource management area, and used a lot of the same way of how you do building those causal models there, and it works very, very well, and at the same time, and that's maybe something we are not even talking about really much, because I don't even have a good answer for that. Is like you see a lot of people now trying to do root cause analysis with LLMs, right? But how far does this scale, right? Because every time you do that, you spend a lot of tokens, right? And now the thing is, sure, you can maybe do this for your incident alerts, but if you think about what I said about prediction, prevention, like keeping your house in order, like do you really want to take every symptom that you see and send it down into an LLM and get like hours of compute just wasted on figuring that out? I think that's not going to scale at some point. But as I said, there I'm not. That's something we still have to see how this turns out, right? I mean, LLMs are amazing and can do amazing things, but
and expensive at the same time.
Yeah, they're expensive and have their limitations, right? And this, again, what I said, we're engineers, right? And this is something like most of us, and I guess you too, like through how many hype cycles did we went, right? Like I was already a teenager in the .com bubble. We had
I change mine every couple of weeks.
Yeah, we had a few of them, and like, and when I heard about blockchains the first time, and this was even pre like everybody getting crazy about it, I was like, oh, this is really cool. This has use case A, B, C, and D. And then I saw this bubble happening, and everybody was like, oh, this is going to turn everything around. And yeah, LLMs are changing the world. There's nothing to be said about that. But like, yeah, we should think about that from an engineering perspective and say like, hey, this is a good use case for LLMs. And this year over here, like, I mean, we can fix that without an LLM. So, and then I stopped talking.
It's an engineering problem, and it needs an engineering solution. And with every engineering, so the difference between engineering and science is you're not trying to find an answer. You're trying to find an answer given a threshold of
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Since you've brought up the idea of like the probabilistic approach to causality, are you implying that you are vectorizing Oriole data? Because I believe at the end of the day, you want to deal with numbers in probabilistic approach. Does that mean that you're vectorizing all your data, or how does it go?
I would say yes. So at some point, I have to point to some of my colleagues who are more in the engineering part of that. But yeah, so the part I understand is like, yeah, we are doing a lot of vectorization there, and like really look at like what I said, like
the reason why I'm asking this is you've talked about scalability of the LLMs and solutions, and I think if you are vectorizing that, you will also run into those problems, because I think most of the solutions out there, they have vectors in memory and not in storage.
Oh, you mean that kind? No. Okay, yeah. Okay, sorry. So vectorization is what I meant with like a vector. So what I mentioned about those symptoms I mentioned a minute before, like what we take in as a vector is like, here's a service, and this service can show the following 20, 30 symptoms. And then we send a bit vector that says like, it's here and it's not here, right? And by that, it's very compressible and scalable. But as I said, like, you need to invite some of my colleagues to
You
dive
should
into
you should
that.
connect
So,
me with someone. You should connect me with
yeah,
someone to talk about this.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's really interesting. Do you want to keep talking about like the this part?
Yeah, sure. So there's the thing I always like I have been a pre-sales engineer for an APM vendor before, right? And the cool thing about APM and observability is like there's so many things that you can show, right? Because you have all the alerts and all the crazy things, and the thing with Causely is like, hey, here's the root cause, here's the explanation, here's the impact, done, right? So this me as someone who has spent a lot of time in this area is like, I'm super excited about that. But of course, like, people are like, hey, but I don't know, show me more. So yeah, of course, let me show you more. So if we now go into the root causes, what I have promised, right? So we have this one really critical root cause, right? Where we say like, hey, this is like, take care of that. Your house is burning, fix that, right? But the thing is, if you have a house or if you own your flat, right, you're not waiting for your kitchen to burn down to figure out that your electricity is not okay, right? So you will do upkeep in your building, right? You will think about like, hey, this stuff is really old. I need to do some maintenance. I need to do some prevention, right? And there's non-urgent root causes, as we call them today. They tell you like, hey, there's other things that are not maybe yet impacting any of your customers, but if something goes south because like the load gets even higher, or the error rate is getting even higher, then this is going to explode in your face, right? So the thing is, what you can now do with Causely, for example, I can click here into this policy administration thing, and see like, okay, here's again like a so-called service malfunction, and it tells me again like, okay, this is happening in policy administration, but it's also impacting a few other ones. And then again, it describes the use case, it gives me a little bit of context. And then what it also gives me is like insight into logs, right? It tells me like, hey, here's a set of logs that help you to explain even better what the root cause may be, right? And then we then also can use it, and here you see a much better example of remediation, right? We can really tell you like, hey, do the following thing to improve your environment. We even have situations where we can auto apply that, but what we recommend today is really like, in that case, put it into like your MCP or whatever and tell it like, hey, fix that thing for me. But the thing I also wanted to call out here with the logs, what I just mentioned, is like what I said in the beginning, right? People love data hoarding their logs and events and whatnot. But if we really think about observability and what logs are in that context, they're most valuable as evidence, right? If my traces and if my metrics, so my metrics help me to understand what we said, like what's the difference of my environment. The traces really help me to locate that one service, and if I have in-service tracing, maybe even closer to say like, okay, this here is the problem. The logs give me evidence, right? They give me more information. So ideally, my log line is not like, I don't know, transaction failed, but maybe more something, the B connection pool exhausted or something like that. But that also means that like, throw away a lot of your logs, right? At least for observability purposes. Audit requirements, very different chapter, right? If you have to store them, find your data lake, dump them there, right? But for your logs, keep the ones that you really need, right? And of course, there's a lot of engineering that needs to be done on the OTel side and on the community side to talk about that. But don't hoard your logs, right? Think about them more as this kind of evidence. And this is really something I love about Causely, that we so those logs, we only pull them in if we want to have them, right? We only pull them into our system to say like, hey, we have here a cause, and that can be explained best by this and this and that, and then to give you even more details, we pull in some evidence for that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've talked about a lot of things here. I want to go back and talk about like the general things here. So you've been in the industry, and I think you have seen a lot of use cases and many applications of this observability thing in general. And I want, do you have any figures or numbers, for example, of if we talk about data retention for, let's say, traces? As you said, for logs, it's going to be regulations basically and audit requirements. But
Yeah.
for OpenTelemetry, is it like a I know it's business dependent, industry dependent, but just like a number there, like storage or number of days or number of things.
Yeah. I think I mean, of course, it highly depends on a lot of questions, right? So traces. So maybe let's start with metrics. They have, let's say, really
Yeah.
like some. So many companies or many metrics backends today offer you like 13 months. Why are they doing that? Because some companies have days in the year they want to compare with the days in the year before. We just had Cyber Week, right? We just had Black Friday and Thanksgiving, right? There's a like they want to see like what happened last year and how are we performing this year, right? That's why those 13 months make a lot of sense. And metrics are cheap to store, and if you, let's say, not store all the metrics, that totally makes sense, right? For logs, again, and this is my greenfield, perfect, purposeful observability perspective, again, is take the logs into your backend that you really need to explain what's going on. So you could take, I don't know, keep them for a few days, right? And I would even say that the same is true for traces, but this would mean like you have your game up to a certain level. If not, yes, of course, there's a lot of value to, let's say, keep them for a month. So you can do those, hey, we did a deployment like 4 weeks ago, and we could want to compare certain traces from back then to right now. Then this is definitely also a good number, right?
And is sampling a thing here, or is it just a buzzword?
No, sampling is like completely underutilized, and I think the one problem I see with sampling is that unfortunately, so first of all, I have to say we have amazing people in the hotel community that take care of sampling, right? Every time I talk with them, I'm flabbergasted myself because like half of what they're talking about I'm not understanding, and the half I'm understanding is like, wow, that totally makes sense, right? This is like propagating randomness from one service to the other to make better sampling decisions and whatever. Like this is really like top of the game, right? But at the same time, there's not enough people doing that. So for example, we have the tail sampling processor and the collector, and it's lacking more people to help with that, to really like do better sampling there, right? To make better decisions. Because at the end of the day, think about it. Let's say service A talks with service B, and there's 1,000 interactions every second, right? That means like you get 1,000 spans. And if all of them are okay, they more or less look the same, right? So why would you keep 1,000 of them, right? So ideally, what you should figure out is something where you say like, hey, of course I have error traces, and probably I need all of them. I mean, even that is debatable. Then you have traces that are not as fast as I want them to be, right? So they're like above a threshold. Personally, I would prefer if you would do some standard deviation or some I think standard deviation is not the right deviation, but like
Distribution of your data, and then
yeah, exactly, that you do baselining, I think is another word for that you say like, hey, I don't know, over time the system learns what is normal and then also understands like what is a good deviation, and everything that's above that is slow, so track that, right now. For example, my last point of information was, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they have this now, is the sampling processor can only do static thresholds, right? It can only say like, okay, everything that's slower than X, take care of that, right? But that's the other place where you can reduce drastically. And then everything that's normal, so that's within your bounds, that is not having an error, yeah, do 1 in 1,000 or do 1 every 5 minutes or something like that, right? I mean, of course, you need a little bit of understanding what is normal, especially if you go beyond incident response again and maybe say like, hey, my development team maybe wants to optimize and they want to understand where are the bottlenecks in production, and giving them some traces for that is definitely valuable, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, sampling is like hopefully
It,
getting a lot better
it
into
should
the
be there, but
future.
it's not there yet, correct?
Sorry?
It should be there, but it's not there yet.
It's not there yet. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, since you've talked about lacking people to work on those projects, do you wanna show people how they can contribute and how they can get involved
Yeah,
in the
sure,
project?
sure. So before I do that, let me maybe give you like my overall my how you say like my how you say that,
Overview.
like a high level pitch on how and why you should contribute to open source, right? So why should you contribute to open source? I often say like I use a quote here by a woman called Gretchen Rubin. She said like, be selfless if only for selfish reasons, and be selfish if only for selfless reasons, right? So if you contribute to open source and if you do something selfless, have a good reason for yourself, right? Because like, remember my story from the beginning, I had a good reason contributing, right? And here's now a specific example. Since I know a little bit your audience, like we have a French localization of the OpenTelemetry website, right? And if you say like, hey, I want to understand this OpenTelemetry thing better, a good opportunity is to go to the website, read a page, and translate it into your native language, right? In that time, you're already like you spend a lot of time with the text. Sure, we can run it through an AI, but the thing like there's nuances, right? There's like what's the right word for that, etc., etc. That's a good starting point. And the thing that then I very often start small, right? Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't come to us and say like, oh, by the way, I translated like 20 pages. Start with one, get feedback, play this game with the maintainers to get them to understand them. Then also get in touch with us, right? We have our meetings, we have Slack channels. You can talk with us, right? And then stick around, right? Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to get you started, right? And then what you can do, of course, and now I'm maybe if you can share my screen real quick, you can go into any of the OpenTelemetry repositories and go into the issues list, and then there is something, a label that is called good first issue, and we try to maintain them, but of course they get selected really often, where you can say like, oh, there's something where maybe I as a newcomer can help really well. If there's no good first issues, there's also one that's called help wanted, or you reach out and say like, hey, there's something I want to help with. If you now want to have an overview of like what is there in the OpenTelemetry project, there's the community repository, right? So there's OpenTelemetry community. And if you scroll down there a little bit, there's a long list of sub-projects. And the way I recommend it is like, think about what you're good at already, right? Is there maybe something where you can start from? I picked JavaScript because like, beside PHP back then, it was like a language that felt very natural to me, right? So I did not start with Go because sure, I tried it out, but I have no idea about it, right? So don't make it hard for yourself.
Yeah, and the contribution cannot be only code. You can also contribute, as you said, in documentation, in translation, in whatever the project needs, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good call out. Like if you're not a developer, if you're not a tech writer, right? I mean, a project is like a company. We need all these skills, right? I even talked with marketing people and told them like, hey, we need marketing people in OpenTelemetry, right? I would be more than happy to have someone thinking about how we can improve our social media posts, etc., etc. So bring those things to the table, right?
Yeah, I think we're running out of time here. I'm gonna ask you all last technical questions, and if you don't know the answer, you can just point me for the right person, and I will host them next time. Auto instrumentation versus manual instrumentation. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. At the end, you will need and you will use both without even knowing it, right?
Yeah.
So manual instrumentation means like you sit down yourself. We often call it also code-based instrumentation, right? You as a developer say like start a span, end a span, start a metric, whatever, right? Automatic instrumentation, like this term is meaning a lot of things, but the one thing is, of course, like, hey, I use a Java agent or I use a eBPF instrumentation and I throw it against my application and metrics and logs and traces are dropping out. But there are also instrumentation libraries that you as a code-based developer will use to speed yourself up, right? You don't have to instrument your HTTP framework, your SQL database driver, etc., etc. That's also to some extent automatic instrumentation. But to give you the short answer, since we're over time, is like use both, right? And if you want to get quick results, use automatic instrumentation, and then get better at manual instrumentation. Use it again, purposeful instrumentation. Use it for the most critical things that you have, and then work your way backwards and use automatic instrumentation for the rest.
Okay, that's a great thing. One last thing: is it possible to connect us with somebody who is very technical and casually, so that we can have the details of what's going on?
I will give you the details for another conversation if you.
Yeah, that would be.
Like. Yeah.
I think we had a great time. We didn't even feel that the time passing by.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you very much.
Do you want to give us any last words or anything about casually? Or anything?
I mean, all that I can say is like, hey, Assis, thank you for having me and everybody for listening in. I also really enjoyed like having a conversation going on this side, people asking questions. And if you want to learn more about OpenTelemetry, really don't hesitate, reach out on LinkedIn. Of course, if you want to learn more about Causely, also reach out to me. Like we're more than excited to show you the product and help you with that. And beyond that, yeah, enjoy your evening and see you in the internet.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for Amin and Ricardo, who was making the show in the comments here. And yeah, let's see you next week and have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.